When it comes to avoidant individuals, love often isn't something that rolls off the tongue easily. Saying "I love you" might feel far too vulnerable, too exposing, too open-ended.
But that doesn't mean the feeling isn't there.
In fact, one of the most powerful lessons we can learn from understanding avoidant attachment is that they often show love in ways that don't look like the traditional fairy tale version we're used to seeing in movies. They demonstrate care through action, specifically through acts of service. What they may lack in verbal affirmation, they often compensate for by doing things that improve your life, reduce your stress, or provide support behind the scenes. This isn't just about being helpful. It's a deeply rooted expression of emotional investment that feels safer and more manageable to them than direct verbal intimacy. Let's be clear, this isn't laziness or emotional withholding. Avoidants are not emotionless, far from it. They just struggle to process, trust, and express emotions in the same way more secure or anxious people do. Their emotional blueprint tells them, "Don't rely too much on anyone," or "If you show too much, you'll get hurt." So they default to practical expressions. Fixing your leaky faucet, making sure your car has gas, helping you get to the airport on time, these are not just chores to them. These are covert love letters sent in a language they know how to speak. Think of it like this. While some people write poetry to say "I love you," avoidants install shelves. They anticipate what you need before you ask for it. They might not say "I miss you," but they'll quietly check in on you when you're sick or pick up your favorite snack on their way home. It's subtle but deeply meaningful when you understand the subtext. They're showing you they see you. They're attuning to your world, not with words, but with consistent and dependable behavior, and this doesn't mean you should accept breadcrumbs or settle for emotional starvation. Rather, it means learning to interpret their language without judgment. Just as someone who speaks a different language still feels the same emotions, avoidants feel love, fear, loyalty, and passion, just in a dialect that leans into doing rather than declaring. That insight can shift everything in a relationship. It turns moments of frustration, "Why won't they say how they feel?" into opportunities for connection. What are they trying to show me through what they're doing? Another key part of this is timing and environment. Avoidants may engage in acts of service when the emotional climate feels safe, when expectations are lower, or when they feel in control of their output. They're more likely to go out of their way for you when they sense that it won't immediately lead to an overwhelming emotional response they're not prepared to handle. That's why some avoidants are incredibly thoughtful around your birthday, holidays, or in times of need, because it gives them a clear container in which to show care without a flood of emotional entanglement they might fear they can't manage. Ultimately, the goal isn't to excuse avoidant behavior that's cold, dismissive, or hurtful. But we have to acknowledge that not everyone expresses love the same way. If you're in a relationship with an avoidant partner, learning to recognize acts of service as expressions of love can help reduce conflict and increase intimacy. It can also empower you to meet them where they are without abandoning your own needs. Love can be loud and poetic, but it can also be quiet and functional. And for avoidants, "I love you" is often spelled out in the small, thoughtful, consistent ways they show up in your life, one unspoken act at a time. When an avoidant person pulls away, the immediate reaction from their partner is often fear, confusion, or even anger. It feels like rejection, it feels like abandonment, but for the avoidant, the act of pulling away isn't about detachment from the relationship. It's often their way of preserving it. It's important to understand that in the avoidant mind, closeness triggers survival level fears. They may have learned early on that intimacy equals danger, either because it was inconsistent, conditional, or overwhelming in their formative years. So when a relationship starts to feel emotionally charged or too close for comfort, Their instincts kick in to create space, not to leave, but to stay regulated . For them, distance is safety, it's control, it's how they recenter when things start to feel unpredictable or emotionally intense. You might be saying, but I just told them how much I cared. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't pushing. But to the avoidant nervous system, even vulnerable expressions of love can feel like too much too fast. That doesn't mean they don't want love. It just means they need to feel safe in love . And their version of safety often looks like pulling back, creating a pause, or emotionally shutting the door for a while. They're not ending the bond, they're trying to preserve themselves within it. This can be deeply painful for the person on the receiving end, especially if they operate with an anxious or secure attachment style. It can feel like a sudden loss, like being punished for being emotionally open. But here's where the power of awareness comes in. When you stop taking their withdrawal as a personal failure and start seeing it as a nervous system trying to cope, everything begins to shift. That emotional distance isn't proof they don't love you. It's a signal that their system is overwhelmed. In that moment, love from their perspective looks like space, not closeness. Not because they don't care, but because they care and don't know how to deal with it safely . One of the most critical things to remember is that avoidants are not intentionally cold or cruel. In fact, many of them are deeply sensitive underneath the armor they wear. But they've internalized the idea that vulnerability is weakness, or that emotional needs lead to disappointment or shame. So instead of talking through their discomfort, they retreat. This gives them time to self-regulate, to process in private, and to avoid the perceived risk of losing control or being engulfed by someone else's emotional needs. Here's where relationships either grow stronger or break down. If the partner of the avoidant chases them, demands answers, or tries to force closeness during the withdrawal, it reinforces avoidance belief that intimacy is overwhelming and unsafe. But if the partner can hold steady, allow the space without resentment, and trust that the connection isn't being destroyed, it actually begins to build trust in the avoidant. Why? Because they learn that space doesn't mean punishment, and that they can return without a war waiting for them. And when they do come back, because most avoidants do, it's usually quiet. They won't burst in with grand apologies or emotional declarations. They'll ask about your day. They'll suggest watching a show together. They'll bring you a coffee. That's how they test the water, re-establish connection, and communicate. I'm here. I still care. But they do it without fanfare, without emotional intensity. If you can recognize that as a step forward, not a lack of effort, it changes everything. Ultimately, avoidants pull away not because they don't want to be close, but because they've been wired to believe that closeness will cost them their independence, stability, or emotional safety. And ironically, the distance they create is often their way of trying to hold on to the relationship, to themselves, and to the fragile balance between love and fear they're still learning to manage. In everyday life, avoidance may seem distant, emotionally unavailable, or even indifferent. They can be hard to read, hard to connect with, and often resist verbal intimacy or overt displays of affection. But everything shifts when there's a crisis. In moments when the ground beneath you falls apart, when tragedy strikes, illness hits, or life suddenly demands strength, avoidant individuals often become the most reliable and steady people in room. It's not accidental, it's not performative, it's how they express care and loyalty when it matters most. While they may not offer emotional closeness in the traditional dated ways, they have a deep sense of responsibility and purpose that activates when someone they love is in trouble. This is one of the paradoxes of avoidant attachment. In ordinary emotional situations, sharing feelings, being vulnerable, discussing future hopes. They might seem to shrink or disengage. But in high-pressure environments, when there's no time for messy feelings or layered conversations, their competence and calmness take over. When others freeze or fall apart, avoidants often step forward. They manage logistics, they keep things running. They make decisions, they do what needs to be done, and underneath all of that, there is a quiet, unspoken message: I care about you, I'm here, I've got you. To the person on the receiving end, this can be both comforting and confusing. You may be wondering, why are they so present now when they were so distant before? But this is where the key insight lies. Avoidants often find emotional safety in structure and action. Crises, for all their intensity, provide a very clear purpose: help, solve, support. That's a script they can follow. That's a moment where they don't have to navigate the vulnerability of feelings or the messiness of mutual emotional need. They can just do asterisk, and in that doing, they find connection on their terms. This doesn't mean they're only useful in a crisis or that their love is only accessible when things go wrong. It means that when their emotional defense system is bypassed, when the need is immediate, external, and practical, they are freed from the weight of emotional ambiguity. Helping in tangible ways feels safe. It's not threatening. It allows them to show up, express love, and offer support without having to cross the emotional minefields that daily intimacy can sometimes represent for them. It's also worth acknowledging the strength and courage it takes for them to do this. Many avoidants were raised in environments where emotions weren't safe, needs weren't met, or independence was prized above all else. So when they show up in a crisis, when they drive hours to help you, sit by your hospital bed, or solve a problem without being asked, it's not just about being useful. It's about overriding their own discomfort to make sure you feel safe. That's love in action. It's not romantic in the traditional sense, but it's fierce, loyal, and enduring. The danger comes when this pattern is misinterpreted. Some partners might only feel close to avoidance during times of struggle because that's when they're most engaged. And that can lead to unhealthy cycles of chaos or emotional testing. If I'm in trouble, they'll come close, so maybe I need to create trouble to feel loved. But the answer isn't to provoke crisis, it's to recognize and appreciate the way avoidants love through presence and problem solving, while also encouraging emotional connection outside of those moments. Their reliability in storms can become a bridge to building trust in calm weather too. In the end, avoidants may never say, "I love you," when the skies are clear. But when the world starts falling apart, when you need someone solid and calm, they'll be there. Not with dramatic speeches or emotional outpourings, but with action, stability, and quiet devotion. And sometimes the most profound expressions of love aren't whispered in candlelight. They're delivered in the way someone carries you when you can't carry yourself. For many people, love is expressed through words, long talks, deep conversations, heartfelt affirmations. But for avoidant individuals, that's often not the case. To them, love lives in presence, not performance. It shows up in the silence between conversations, in the stillness of doing something together, in the quiet comfort of being near without being asked to share. While others seek closeness through emotional disclosure, avoidants often find it through shared experiences where there's no pressure to open up, no demand to articulate what's happening inside them. That's why, for avoidants, shared silence can be more intimate than verbal vulnerability. When they sit with you without speaking, that's not emotional absence. It's a form of connection that feels safe and real. Imagine sitting on the couch with an avoidant partner. You're watching a show, or maybe just scrolling through your phones in the same room. No deep talk, No questions about childhood wounds or future dreams, but they're there. They're not running. They're not checking out. They're simply being with you. In their world, that moment may hold more emotional weight than hours of conversation. Why? Because to them, the ability to exist side by side without pressure represents peace, trust, and comfort. It means they don't have to perform. They don't have to fix anything. They can just be, and they trust that you'll accept that. That kind of connection doesn't always look like love to someone who craves verbal intimacy. It might feel like indifference, like a lack of emotional engagement. But if you look closely, there are subtle signals. The way they sit near you instead of across the room. The way they pass you the remote without being asked. The way they make sure you're comfortable even if they never ask you directly. These micro gestures are often their way of saying, I care about you, and I feel safe enough to relax around you. There's a reason silence is so significant for avoidance. In silence, there's no risk of saying the wrong thing, of being judged, of exposing emotional vulnerabilities they don't yet know how to name. It offers control, and for someone who fears engulfment or emotional chaos, that control is calming. But here's what's important. When an avoidant chooses to spend consistent, quiet time with you, that's not laziness or emotional withdrawal. That's an act of inclusion. You've been invited into their inner world, not the world of feelings and fears, but the world of day existence, which for them is sacred ground. It can take practice to appreciate this kind of intimacy, especially if you're wired to seek emotional feedback through words. But when you learn to recognize the intention behind the quiet, you stop needing them to explain themselves all the time. You stop demanding constant validation. Instead, you start noticing the way they consistently show up in low pressure moments, the way they value your presence without requiring either of you to perform. That's not emotional avoidance, that's emotional trust expressed in their language. Of course, this doesn't mean that verbal connection shouldn't be built over time. It's healthy and necessary for emotional bonds to include shared feelings and open communication. But with avoidance, that process often begins in these silent spaces. These are the training grounds where they learn to feel safe with you, and the more you honor the silence, the more likely they are to eventually speak into it. Because when they know they won't be pressured, judged, or cornered, their defenses lower, and from that quiet place, real emotional intimacy can grow. So if your avoidant partner sits with you in silence, don't see it as a lack of interest or detachment. See it as a milestone. You're close enough that they no longer feel the need to keep their guard up. You've become part of their stillness, and for someone who's spent their life protecting themselves from too much closeness, that silent moment might be the loudest I love you. They know how to give. When an avoidant loves you, they may not craft romantic declarations or dream aloud about the future, but they often do something far more powerful. They quietly start building a life around you. Not just with you in the moment, but with you in mind as they shape their routines, make decisions, and plan their world. They might not say, I can't imagine life without you, but they'll gradually reorganize their personal space, time, and even long-term goals to make room for you. This isn't an impulsive or grand gesture. It's subtle, deliberate, and deeply telling. It's how they express commitment without having to face the vulnerability of speaking it out loud. For avoidant individuals, emotional intimacy can feel destabilizing, but practical, structural intimacy, shared routines, overlapping responsibilities, and silent cooperation is where they thrive. If you watch closely, you'll notice the changes. Suddenly, their fridge is stocked with things you like. Their weekend plans subtly include you. Their apartment starts to feel like a place where both of you belong. Maybe they don't say, "You're home to me," but they give you the spare key. Maybe they don't talk about building a future together, but they start factoring you into every decision they make, from where to live to what kind of job they pursue. This kind of love may not come wrapped in emotional expression, but it is love nonetheless. It's devotion translated into action. And while it might lack the emotional sparkle of expressive relationships, it often brings a kind of grounded security that lasts. Avoidants tend to be cautious with their energy. They don't invest easily. So when they begin to structure their life to include you, it's because they've decided you're worth the risk, even if they never use those words. It's also important to understand that avoidants equate love with responsibility. For them, love means doing right by someone, not in bursts of passion, but in consistent presence. They often won't ask what you need emotionally. Instead, they'll look for what you need practically. And when they start taking those needs into account, sometimes even before you articulate them, it's their way of showing that they care deeply. They just express it through preparation, through long-term thinking, through quiet inclusion. One of the most profound ways an avoidant shows love is by slowly dismantling the walls of their independence, not destroying them entirely, but making space within them. They're not the type to rush into a shared bank account or cohabitation, but once they trust you, they begin laying emotional bricks around the two of you. Not to trap, but to protect. Their version of closeness is steady and private, not loud or spontaneous. They're building something that lasts, and they're doing it with you in mind, even if they're not saying it. This often gets missed by partners who are more emotionally expressive. It's easy to overlook the significance of practical decisions when you're looking for words or emotional engagement. But once you shift your lens, you can begin to appreciate how deeply embedded you've become in their life, not just as a romantic interest, but as someone they've allowed into the ecosystem of their everyday world. That's sacred ground for someone with avoidant tendencies. The real challenge is learning to trust these nonverbal signals of commitment without constantly needing reassurance. Because the more you pressure an avoidant to express themselves in ways that feel unsafe to them, the more they retreat. But the more you acknowledge and respect the way they quietly build a life that includes you, the more secure they begin to feel. And ironically, the more likely they are to eventually let you into their emotional world too. So no, avoidants might not tell you they love you every night, but they'll show you through the life they slowly build with your presence at the center. The routines, the shared space, the long-term planning, none of it is accidental. It's careful, it's chosen. And for someone who fears losing control or being emotionally engulfed, building that life around you is not just love. It's their boldest act of trust.